Well, I'm back. This is our second episode, and this one, me and my group were trying to do something a little different. I don't know if I ever did this before, but I think it would be really cool. Many of you guys know I'm from Brazil, and I moved to the United States about a decade ago because of Fuel Tech, right? So we were expanding the business, and I moved here. But like not many people know my passionate side of things regarding racing, and I think it would be cool to tell that story a little. And I really hope that this can motivate some people to do similar if they really love racing and any kind of racing. It can be drag racing, road racing, you name it, right? Or if they want to just listen to a little bit of my story, right? I personally think that's really cool. And I think this is pretty much the best environment that I could have. I am here at the Fuel Tech USA FT education facility, and right next to me is this pretty boy here, 1968 Camaro, Jerry Bico built, that I recently purchased from a great friend of mine, Brian Shaw. And this is the very first professional drag car that I drove in my life. And it's been, just waiting, sitting on a corner for some years now. And I just purchased it, like I said to you guys, to try to bring this thing back to life. So I finally able to talk to Brian about letting go his baby. He struggled for a good 2 years about selling or not selling the car to me. On this episode, I'm gonna be talking about Lewis. I don't know, how can you say, driver, tuner, mechanic, a passionate guy that really like high performance stuff. I don't even know where this starts, okay? I don't recall. One thing that I do recall is there is a family story about me and my uncle, right? When back in the day he had an Opala. At this point, some of you guys know what is Opala. Like we have Daddy Dave, Murder Nova, other guys from the United States that actually like this car because they have a relationship with us and they end up knowing. But this is pretty much like Brazilian muscle car, right? The Chevrolet Opala is the Brazilian muscle car. And I was a baby pretty much, right? I was on top of the hood on that car. And that's the first, photo, video, whatever of me around a car, right? And I was always addicted to stuff that had engines, right? So in Brazil, I grew up on a really automotive friendly environment, let me say. We had, myself, right? We had great Formula One drivers, and Formula One is really strong in Brazil. So I grew up, right? I was a kid, I was a young kid, seeing, Ayrton Senna coming up. We had Nelson Piquet. There is a lot of racetracks in Brazil, and mostly road racing, just to be honest, okay? Mostly road racing. But I grew up on that environment, right? We had Emerson Fittipaldi that went to Indy, and they all highly successful. So when I was young, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, there was that environment, that was really focused as automotive motorsports, right? Different kind of sports, right? I saw Barrichello when he was a young driver and all that stuff, Felipe Massa on Formula One. There's so many Brazilian racers on that time that I was young that it kind of pushes you towards the passion if you have it, right? So I remember myself always doing anything that I could related to cars, going to car meets on gas stations and going with friends on go-kart tracks, stuff like that. The very first day that I was able to get a license, I got the license so I could drive in the street. Back in Brazil, you have to be 18 years old. It's not like here that you can do 16 some places. So I was able to get on the same day, right? So same day I was there with my license anxious to just be able to drive it, right? Just to be able to drive it. Before that, I used to go to some events with my bicycle. I would literally ride my bicycle somewhere just so I could be around cars and, you know, everything that people would back in the day do to cars and stuff. My dad used to take me to racetracks. Formula Truck is a road racing class with big rigs, right? Tow rigs that actually race modified to this. It's a really large class in Brazil. And man, I used to watch them through my whole, you know, as I was growing up from, I don't know, 10, 12 and beyond. And I still watch. I think it's really cool because they're really high horsepower. They're fast, they're heavy, so it's cool. But like not much further than that, I got into serious racing, right? I was young. I just left the army. I spent about 4 years in the army. It was a really cool moment in my life. I am a lieutenant in cavalry. And so it was attached to vehicles as well, you know, so tanks and stuff like that. Really cool, really good, great, amazing time, learn a lot. When I left the thing, it didn't took me much longer to actually join Fuel Tech, right? So I joined Fuel Tech, and I joined Fuel Tech with a clear objective. I was so attached to cars and doing stuff, you know, I used to put my engines together by myself and modify the car by myself, and I was young, right? That I was hired initially at Fuel Tech to do this, to make sure that I could be attached to customers that are doing this, and I ended up kind of gravitating towards competition. So my very first years of Fuel Tech, I was already doing like tech support at racetracks. I would go to road racing events and make sure that they were being able to use the product at the fullest, right? Fuel Tech was always strong in drag racing, but we wanted to start expanding to road racing. And so I was always at the track, And if I wasn't there as tech support, I would be there on a time attack event, driving, you know, trying to get something, renting a race car, trying to get lessons from a driver, a professional driver that was my friend. Everything happened like that. And what made me go kind of up really aggressive, really quick, was my move to United States, right? So about 10 years ago or so, 10, 11, something like that, I moved to United States. And it's cool because the whole history is kind of attached to this car to some extent, right? One of the very first guys that I met that believed on what Fuel Tech was doing and what I could do with him to make sure that he would grow into the sport was Chris Patrick. And I remember that was actually pretty cool. We put Fuel Tech on the car, and I went to his shop because he's close by here in Atlanta. And we went to the track as well. And when the car wasn't even ready to go to the track. Some of the parts he actually drop shipped to the track, right? The car ran at the shop, but it was missing like a drive shaft, missing some stuff. And when I got to the track, that was actually really cool. I met James Hancock, right? So we three, right, made that car work. And on the first time out, we had a great outing, you know. Back in the day, that's 2015 or so, you know, 15, 16, something like that. It was a Pro Nitrous car, first time out, didn't hurt the motor, went 3 seconds at 8 mile. Today's kind of slow, you know, any kind of 390 something on a nitrous car or a Pro Mod, any kind of, it's slow. But back in the day, it wasn't that bad, right? And it was really cool to do that on the very first time. And not much longer than that, there was one guy, Brian Shaw, that came along with the group. He was already friend of James and Chris. And Brian came along and he's like, man, this is really cool. We raced for a long time. He's actually, you know, he owns a race team for a long time. So, and they knew each other for a long time. I was a newcomer on this group. We went to the track, started getting better, you know, competing here and there. But at some point, like, they needed a better car. So they tried to do something. Chris tried to get a better car. Brian came up with a newer engine. He bought a brand new Sony 959. And we tried to put all the pieces together, right? We tried for a couple of times, but there was missing something, right? I think different people sometimes have different ideas. So at that moment, I remember Brian talking to me about, like, I always had my team. I think it's better for me to keep doing this. And I think it was really cool, actually. So we change up some stuff, and Brian called a friend of him, Khalido Belushi. So, Mr. Belushi. Right, multi-time champion everywhere. He still races in HRA. His kid races in HRA. It's so cool, pro mod in HRA, and he has a great racing history. He's from the Middle East. He races over there. He races in the United States. It's actually cool. Drag racing is so universal language, right? He called him and like, man, I'm looking for a car, and Khalid said like, man, I have my championship car. And you're like, what do you mean? Well, I have my championship car. So he was talking about this car. So this is a Jerry Bico 2010 built for Khalido Belushi. And it was a Speedtech. I don't know if you guys remember from Speedtech, that Nitrous brand that was inside his group, right? It was a Speedtech. It was blue and gray and black and stuff. It was actually a really cool paint job. And it said Speedtech on the side. It was this car. He won an HRA Pro Mod championship in 2011 with this car. He flew this car back to Middle East, and he won a DRL championship in the same year, and he parked the car, right? He didn't race much. It was pretty much those 1-2 years. And Brian got a deal, and Khalid he's always nice. Don't worry, I can ship you the car. If you like, it's yours. And this is the cool thing. He shipped the car to Fueltech USA, right? So this car showed up at my doorstep back in 2015 or so, 16, 15. And then Brian called me like, what do you think about the car, Luis? Like, man, this car is amazing. It's a great vehicle. You can clearly see that it's a Jerry Bico car, so it's an amazing vehicle. But it was properly done, everything is correct. I don't see anything that we should be, worry about it. I don't know why he didn't buy it yet. So he ended up buying the car, and he invited James Hancock to drive the car. So James was retired from racing. He came back racing, and we put this car together, right, as a friendship deal. It was pretty much me, Brian, James, just working around. Brian did most of the stuff, right, because the car stayed with him in Virginia, right? Brian lives in Virginia. So he would do most of the stuff. And sometimes I'll go to Brian's shop. Sometimes we'll meet at the track. James will go to the track, and we'll do some testing, racing. It was really cool. We had a blast. I think there was an amazing moment, right? I learned so much from those guys. As I kept doing what I was doing tech support and helping people. As you guys know, Proline was an amazing group that assisted Fueltech as a great leverage point for Fueltech to grow in the United States. So at the same time that I would go to PRA or some other race with my guys, Brian and James, I would go there to try to help other Fueltech customers, right? So not just Proline. Proline was just a big one, but a lot of customers as we were growing up. So I remember so many guys, like I had Larry Larson, right? He went 5 seconds with a street-driven vehicle on Drag Week stuff. Keith Berry, amazing guy, was one of the first customers, like great friend of mine. He passed this year, was a pretty sad deal for drag racing because he was a real drag racing ambassador. They started Street Outlaws, We had Big Chief, Murder Nova, Daddy Dave, and a bunch of other guys that swapped to Fueltech. So as people are growing into the sport, or they are getting faster, and they will see, Proline doing good and other guys doing good, Fueltech was expanding. It was cool because I had the opportunity to go with this car, and it was like, I was always feeling like it was mine, back in the day. So James was driving, Brian was the crew chief, I was tuning with them. We're all as a group, there was no like a single decision. We all talk about it, but obviously it's a Fueltech car. So I was handling the keyboard, let me say, and we were talking about how we're gonna do this, how we're gonna do that, and it was awesome to also improve the product. I could use this car with them, having a great time. We won US Nationals 2017, then we won Pro Nitros at Galot, PRA, it was amazing. We had other great outings. Drag racing is rough, so you ain't gonna win every race, right? It was a good time, right? And at some point, right, the product was really developed. Everyone was doing good. James also has his own car that his son Jamie drives, and it was pretty much RVW, Race Vero the World. So it was not a conflict. This was a Pro Nitros car. He had that RVW Nitros car. So I was going with James to RVW races, then James with me and Brian to Pro Nitros races. It was really good, you know. But at some point, I voiced to them, guys, just so you guys know, I really like race cars. I want to drive it. What do you guys think? And then they kind of both look at me like, well, like it's not that simple, but it looks to be easy, but like this is hardcore 3 second, 200 mile plus on the 8 mile. You're like, okay, I get it. I'm not saying that's easy. I'm just saying like, I want to drive, right? Around the same zone, we did something really cool, right? We purchased a mainline hub dyno. So we were not the first hub dyno in the United States, right? But we were the first ones. But I can say this proudly, we were the first ones using the dyno how it's supposed to be used, on my opinion, right? And we were having customers with cars on the dyno pretty much every day, right? We kind of developed our own way to run the dyno, that we could simulate drag racings, going through gear shifting and power management and everything. It was slam pack booked. And I was driving most of them, right? As today, the last time we accounted for, I have close to 3,000 laps on the dyno. So that's a bunch of laps, right? And talking to Brian and James, they agree, like, man, you actually have the experience on the car, right? Like you did so many laps on the dyno. It looks like you'd be, you know, you're a good contender to drive this thing. Like, man, I never drove anything as fast as this. The previous time I went to the 8 mile, it was back in Brazil. With something they will go, I don't know, like 9 seconds to the 8 mile. We talk about something they will go, 14 seconds to the quarter. That's terrible slow, that's minivan slow. Maybe slower than a minivan, right? But that was pretty much what I had available to race back in Brazil. When we talk about this, it was a moment as radio racing was actually picking up, right? And as I said, James had his car with his son driving, Jamie and RVW, so there was a small conflict. James could not drive if this car was radios. So by that time, Brian came up with this idea and he did this paint job. So this paint job, this is not a wrap, right? So Chuck B did this paint job. It's amazing. In person, it's way nicer than on the video. I can promise you guys that. It's unbelievable paint job. And at the same time, Brian said, like, I want to do radio. I think radio is really fun, right? It's like bat racing, you know, you're racing during nighttime. The track's crazy glue, you barely walk, the cars are crazy fast. It's a different environment than pro mod racing. I love them both, but I agree, it's really fun, right? So when we did this, we came to the agreement, maybe this is the moment, maybe you can drive, bud. That was actually really cool, you know. I had the support from my friends, James and Brian, right, to jump into the seat of this deal, right? Unfortunately, James broke his leg not much before we put this thing on the track, and that kind of rushed. The whole idea was James was going to drive this car up to the core being really good, going good laps on the track. He broke his leg, that was gone, right? So I had to start from scratch. So the good thing is James is still on board. He's just not driving. Hurt leg can't drive. We set up this car similar to his. He already had one. And we went to the track. My very first drag race was at Lights Out 11. That was 2020. So we're ending 2025 right now. We're about 2026. You guys watching this video, I guarantee it's 2026. So it's about 5 years ago. Right, so 5 years ago, I went from never driving something more powerful than 300-400 horses to this thing that was a Pro Nitros car, radio RVW, you know, class, about 3,000 to 3,500 horses to the tire, right, on a really lightweight package. I remember like it was today. It was really cool. We did the swap. Most of the swap we did here at my shop at Fueltech. James came along with Jamie, we set up suspension, stuff like that. And we went to the track. We had some small problems early, and we couldn't test much. So my very first half track was the last qualifier. Races go wrong, the weather wasn't awesome, we lost some attempts for whatever reason. I remember the car would shut off, we lose power to the whole car, we had a problem on the main switch, the car would die. The car would literally, after the burnout, die. So I did maybe a couple 60 feet before the half track in qualifying, right? So during qualifying, we kept the pace, let's not rush. I did a 60-foot run, I don't know, I think it went like a 1-0, my very first 60-foot. Then a better 60-foot, and a little further, like 100 feet. I did, I don't know, 90, 960, and shut off, right? But then was last qualifier. So like, well, let's try something, right? It's a 32 car field. And on my first half track, the car went 399. I shut off half track. I believe it went at 250 something to the middle, 970, 60, something like that, 399. And I remember like it was today, Brian was on the radio. And as soon as I let go, right, so I do the 330, I shut off the car, I let it ride, pull the chutes, and then Brian called me on the radio. Welcome to the 3 second, buddy. So that was something that was special, right? We ended up qualifying with that 399. As you can see, that's 2020. This is like 5-6 years ago. Today, 399 won't fly, right? But that day, we qualified on the very bottom, maybe 32, 31st, I don't recall. But it was cool. And first round, it was my first time that I was supposed to do a full lap. That was the agreement, right? Trying to bring me up to be a good driver. And I got Paulo Juste. Great dude. He's from Canada, right? So this is one of the things that I love in drag racing. We have people from everywhere, right? So there was Lights Out 11, first run, Paulo Juste. I believe he had Black Betty already. Black Camaro, Roots blower or screw blower, I don't recall. Back in the day, rules, right? I believe he already was dealing with Salimi, the guys from Salimi and stuff. So I knew it. Man, like it's not going to be easy, you know, but like it is what it is. Let's just the car do what it's supposed to do. Let's see how it goes. And my first lap, my first full lap on this car, I went 376 at 199 miles. That was my first full lap as a drag racing driver. He won. He won a whole shot. He went 378, but I don't recall the reaction time, but he was like maybe 30 thou quicker than me on the reaction time, something like that. But like I wasn't mad by any means, I was happy as hell. That was the very first time I did a full 8 mile on the drag strip. That was Valdosta, South Georgia Motorsports Park. Back in the day was owned by Ozzy. Ozzy owns also Orlando, great partner of ours. And that was really cool, that I would never forget. You know, Lights Out 11, that was really cool, that's 2020. And from then on, you know, like that's 2020. So back in the day, I don't think we even had the 600 out. I think it was FT 500 or something like that. I don't recall. It may be already 600. I think it was the 500, okay? So the 500 was the unit that sparkle everything, Fueltech FT500, they sparkle everything in the United States, right? But then the 600, other units just like they take off. So 2020 was a really busy year. I believe we released the 600 that year. I think it was 1920, the 600. And we did a lot of radio racing with this thing, right? We were going faster. It was really good. Like, I believe we raced this car on Radio Trim for about 2 years or so, something like that. But in 2020, I had another great friend that was really cool, Brandon Pass, right? He's my engine builder. I like to call like that because like he's amazing engine builder, designer, driver, tuner. He's a guy that does it all, right? And in 2020, I was also helping his team, right? Imperial Construction team at an HRA. So they had 3 cars that they were doing HRA, and I was trying to help them out because they were one of the first ones to jump on board blower cars on EFI, right? So I was trying to help them, making sure everything is okay on the EFI deal. And later in the year, Jeff Jones, the team owner, he came to me like, man, it looks like you know what you're doing. You've been driving really well. I was already running 3.6 to the 8 mile. You know, we were doing good runs. We were going further in competition. Like, what do you think about driving my car? And that was really cool because it was kind of out of the blue, right? And then like, but you need to get a license. If you want to go quarter mile and you want to go, you know, drag racing and drag strip and really fast, you need a license, right? So we got along together, and one of the races, they had to test anyway. Jeff couldn't stay. His son that drives the other car couldn't stay either. That was Justin. And then I stayed and ended up driving all 3 cars. Brandon Pass, Jeff Jones, and Justin. 2 C7s and 68, a Larry Jeffers 68, really cool car. I drove all 3 cars to get my license, right? So I drove 3 cars to the quarter mile on that day, and that was St. Louis. And then I was able to apply for my license. We got other guys around the track to sign me off. And it was a really good moment. And a couple weeks, maybe a month later, NHRA Dallas, that was their hometown. I drove for them. That was my first quarter mile race. We qualified really well. And I think we went 568 to the quarter with the thing at 252, something like that. I don't recall if that was racing or testing, right? But it was really cool. I was able to start going faster and faster to the quarter mile. So pretty much on my first year of driving, I went from going 10 seconds to the 8, all the way to 5 seconds to the quarter mile, right? So this was something really cool. And from then on, right, a lot of things happens. But again, my main business is Fuel Tech, right? Fuel Tech's my business. And I run the company with my partner, Anderson, here in the United States. We have another partner back in Brazil that runs the main show back in Brazil, Leonardo. And we work together, we 3, right? So the main thing is the business, making sure everything is running smooth, we developing new products, supporting the customers. Problem is this, my passion is attached to engines, is attached to vehicles, is attached to driving, feeling what you feel when you're on a race car. And from 2020, as we're talking, all the way up to here, I did a lot of racing here and there, you know. 2021, I believe, I was a test driver for Jose Gonzalez, El Janeiro Race Team Pro Line. He won the championship the year in HRA. So I had the pleasure to work with Steve Petty, that was the crew chief, Eric Diller, Pro Line, all their group. It was on the ramp up of the Pro Charger deal. So they were on the first ones to, you know, they actually made the wave, just to be honest, on the Pro Charger. And it was awesome, you know. We did a lot of quarter mile, 8 mile runs and testing engines, camshafts, Pro Chargers. That was a really cool deal. At some point, I drove with Benny Buginga, great customer friend of mine, Portuguese, right? So another one from a different place. I was the first to run 3.6 on a 275 tire. Jamie Miller making the calls, tuning the car. I believe Manny had health issues, him and his wife. That was right on the COVID zone, I believe. And he called me and asked, would you mind driving the car? We have everything ready. We think we can go and be the first ones to go 5.6, but I need a good driver. So I went over there. I believe we qualified number 2 or something like that. But we were the first ones to go 3.6 seconds to the 8 mile on a 275, a Pro 275 class. That was really cool, really cool. That was great achievements. And again, it goes back and forth, right? So last year, I kind of took a little break from driving, put a lot of effort on the company, right? We just had the 700 released. There's a lot of stuff going on. And something happened this year that was really cool. I'm kind of jumping here. We bought a racetrack, right? So I can proudly say that Fuel Tech, not just ECUs now, but we actually own a racetrack. And it's not any racetrack, it's road racing and drag racing, side by side or together. And it has a lot of land. We plan to expand on doing some off-road stuff as well. So this year was a busy year. But at some point, I also told myself, it's hard for me to stay away. So this year, I did a really cool race in Brazil, Interlagos Formula One racetrack. I drove on a really small 4-cylinder front-wheel drive road racing class. I had a blast. 60 cars battling. It's really fun. It's low as hell, I'm gonna tell you that, but it's really fun, really fun. I believe I end up 27 out of 54 cars, something like that. There's really good drivers. It's not like you go there and you're gonna go on the top. Like really, really good drivers go on their race because it's highly technical. Since you don't have much power, you cannot lose momentum. There is no recover, zero recover. So the guys that are really experienced to keep momentum on the car, they're really fast. And I had something that was really cool this year, I must tell you. Brett Salas and the guys from Motion Raceworks, TBM Brakes, they called me one day like, man, I know you like racing. Why don't you follow us and race with us on a drag and drive event? So we got one of their cars, El Toro, really famous Fox body car. We made a swap to Fueltech. They brought it here to the dyno, we made good power, and we went and raced Six Summer. Man, the guys from Sick Weekend and Six Summer, they're amazing, and they put a really good show. So we went over there with El Toro just to have fun. We ended up winning. That was really cool. A Fox body, Coyote powered, single turbo deal, and I believe we averaged 4.7 to the 8 or 4.8 to the 8, something like that. I don't recall if it was a high 4.7 or low 4.8, but it was really cool. Brett, amazing dude, right? He was my co-pilot actually, right? And we just like drove along. It was really fun, really fun. And later in the year, I had a really good one where I was able, and that's what you guys just saw, the first episode. So the first episode of these videos that we've been doing spoke about bringing back to life a Pro Mod. I really hope you guys enjoyed that video, and I believe we're gonna be talking about the car more often, okay? So that car was it is a beautiful car, built for El Genero Pro Line back in 2012. And at some point, change hands, and it was sitting also for some years. So a friend of mine from Brazil bought the car and asked some help to put it back together and make it competitive. So that's what we did. So first time out ever to any kind of test session track, whatever, we put the car back on the 360. It went 368 at 210, and the car is right across the street. I'm actually leaving this video maybe to work on the car, to update the car, and we're gonna show you guys what we're gonna be doing in the car, and we going to US Nationals in about 1 month from now. So maybe 3 weeks from when you guys see this video. And at US Nationals, we're gonna also show to you guys what we're gonna do and what are the results, good or bad. I really hope we can get this thing, that white car, down to bottom 360 so we can qualify the race, or maybe high 3.5s. I don't know if you can do this, okay? But we're gonna try. And while we're trying, I wanna show to you guys what we do, right? So we're gonna be reviewing better what is the changes. The first video was about to bring it to life. This is the second video, talk a little bit about me. And the third video, I don't know, but at some point we're gonna be talking about the white car. And after some time running this thing on radios, right, we end up trying to go to the other way, go back to big tires, and that's how it sits right now, right? So I don't recall the year, but I think it was 22, 23, something like that. I do not recall, but I think it's 22, 23. We put this thing on big tires, and that's where we kind of found out the chassis was just not up to date to the task. I think we went low 70s, high 60s with this thing on big tires with the same power plant and everything that will go 50s on radials, right? So radials use the track as traction. Big tires use the car as traction. So the car has to have traction, right? And that didn't endure much longer because it would require the car to be changed, right? So what happened was in the end, the car was parked, right? So the car being parked since 2023, I believe, 2022, 2023. But right there, I was working really close with my friends from Bar Racing, so Jack Green, Xavier McBride, and they had a car that was sitting, right? The car was just sitting on a corner, right? And interesting story, It's a car that was made just after this one. A Bickel car, was a 69 or a 68, that was manufactured by Bickel not much after for Speed Tech. So this used to be a Speed Tech car, and that car that Bar Racing have, they still have the car, it was also a Speed Tech car. And we were kind of talking like, man, what do you guys do with the car? The car is just sitting on a corner. Why don't we put this thing together and go out racing, right? They're like, maybe. And maybe 2 days later, a wrecker come by my shop with the car. Like, it's crazy. You know, I actually got my guys with cameras, so I'm gonna show you the footage again. The car leaving the wrecker. It's crazy. Like, it came with missing windows, flat tires, missing the front end. The car was, I'm not going to say abandoned because it wasn't abandoned, but the car was like sitting without having attention for a long time. And that was actually really cool. We put that car together. So you guys can see that I kind of like to do this, put cars together that are not running. We put the car together and we went to the track and we did amazing. We went 354 to the 8 on a nitrous car, and as today, he also stands as one of the quickest nitrous runs ever. I believe the record is 354 with a 2, and we went 354 with a 9. So 7,000 of a second of being the quickest ever nitrous driver, car, racer, engine, whatever. Buck race engine is really cool, the same Mark Mickey 3-speed. The car was hauling us. By the end of the year, we saw that the nitro was falling off. There's not many sanctioned bodies that have a rule package where nitros can fairly run, because there's a lot involved on this, and I personally think that they have a substantial disadvantage today. And I don't think I'm wrong, because everyone is moving away from nitros. If it was an advantage, everyone would go to nitros. They don't. They go away from nitros. So nitros is in a disadvantage right now, and we swapped the car to a screw blower. So that car went to a screw blower, and we raced the next year, and we kind of proved the point. You can make a nitrous car become a screw car and do well. We went 352. First race with that thing, swap it from nitrous to screw. So that's my personal best, actually. 352 to the 8 mile, that's my personal best with that car from Bar Racing. And we race up to the end of the year, last year, 2024, right? It was actually the first car that ran the Fueltech FT700 here in the United States on drag racing. That was at Orlando, World Street Nationals last year. And it's cool to see that we have so many more now racing. But like, this was pretty much, you know, the racing here, racing there, from one to another. As the white car came along, this car came, right? I finally able to talk to Brian about letting go his baby. He struggled for good 2 years about selling or not selling the car to me, right? And I respect. This is a great car. This is a car that he has a personal attachment. I have. I believe James also have, because James drove as well. Not many people drove this car. Besides being a 2010, I believe only Khalid Al-Balushi, James Hancock, and me. So 3 drivers, and don't have many runs. I went 3.57 at 207 with this car, 0.89260 feet, right? This is one of the quickest nitrous cars ever, right? It is an amazing vehicle, and you will go through a lot of transformations, okay? It is a 2010 car. It was built, right, about 15 years ago with the best of the best, but everyone learned a lot from there, right? There is a lot of things on this car that will have to change to make it competitive, right? So is this car good? Amazing car. Is this car fast? Yes. Is this car competitive on Pro Mod today? No. For today's standards, if I want to race with that big tire right there, I will have to change stuff. Can this car run really fast on radio? Yes, it can. If I put this thing on a small tire and I run during the night on a heavily prepped track, I truly believe this thing with a screw blower can go 3.4 seconds to the 8. But if I want to be able to race during the day and big tires, this car will have to be updated. So one of the things that I want to show to you guys is what I mean by being updated. Not many people talk about this. Like a lot of people, either they forget to talk, they hold as a secret, or they just forget to talk, right? And I truly believe that knowledge should be spread out. And again, what I'm telling you guys may help you guys, maybe just fun to watch, but I think that if you like cars, it's cool to understand. None of us, I'm not saying none, because maybe, I don't know, maybe Lewis Hamilton is watching this, but like none of us drive Formula One cars. But when we look to Formula One racing, we also want to know what is going on. You know, NASCAR. You watch NASCAR, it's not just about the guys going around. You want to see what is this, what is that, what is this brand, what is they doing, what they change the regulation. So we're going to try to do this on drag racing for you guys. So this car, since it's mine, I can show everything and anything that I want. So this is something that I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you guys what it is, what it's going to become, and when we go to the racetrack, I'm going to show us the results, right? I hope this thing going to go well. Not every single time everything goes as it's planned. It may take longer. It may be costly than I want to, so it may take longer again. Or we may go into hiccups where, I don't know, you go to the track and it rains out. You crank the motor and, I don't know, breaks a rod. You don't know, right? So cope with me. This may take a little longer than we want, but I promise you that we're going to see this thing rolling down the track really fast, and you guys are going to see how we're making this thing to go fast.